Hi everyone. I'm going to give it a start. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. My name is Debra Corey, and the title of my talk is Driving Change as an Employee Engagement Rebel. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about two of my favorite things, employee engagement and being a rebel. And I'm also excited to be here with all of you because I started my HR journey in the education sector. When I was a student, I got my first part-time job and it was in an HR office. So yeah, excited to continue the journey with all of you in the education sector. Speaking of journeys, another journey that I've been on is as a rebel. I have to admit, I think I've always been a little bit of a rebel, but it's just over the last probably 3 or 4 years when I started working with my co-author and writing a book, which is titled The Rebel Playbook, that my full rebel came out and I started wearing my red cape when it comes to being a rebel. And when I talk about being a rebel, what I really mean is seeing things in a different way, challenging the status quo, standing on your head, looking at things from a different perspective. This image here actually on the screen was taken when I did a keynote speak in Dubai right before the first lockdown. And I was trying to make the point about how we need to look through a different lens when it comes to how to engage our workforce. Whoever knew at the time in February of last year that we all would be forced to actually look through a new lens. So I'm sure that you're all in some way, you've been a rebel already because you've had to challenge the status quo. But today I'm really excited to share with you maybe some other ways of looking at things and different perspectives. And I'm going to do that two ways. First of all, I want to share with you a little bit about how the world has been changing and is changing. I'm going to share 10 different ways. The reason I wanted to start with this is I know how insane it's been for all of you. Probably haven't had any chance to sit down and think about it yourself. And I know there's lots of different reports and everything coming out. So I thought I would share my perspective on it as far as what's been happening. And hopefully you'll be sitting there shaking your head going, yep, that's exactly what's happening at my company. So let's start with the first one. The first one is that there has been this need, this desire for connection and community. And I'm sure that you've seen that on a personal perspective, but absolutely from a work perspective. And you've been probably spending tons of your time creating these social connections. I actually wrote a blog a couple weeks ago on social connections, and I was doing some research. I love data. And I found one report that said that social connections are as important to your well-being as eating vegetables, exercising, and getting enough sleep. So next time people give you a hard time about why are you spending all of this time on it, tell them that. It's very important. The next thing that's been really important and really exciting, I have to say, is that we have been celebrating the good in the world. I mean, remember back when we used to stand out on a Thursday night and we'd clap for the NHS, those types of things. And we've been doing that in organizations. I'm sure you've been spending a lot of time celebrating the good. The reason I have this picture here on the screen is that the village I live in, we actually have a cake fairy. Not sure if you have one in your village, and she's absolutely wonderful. Anyone and everyone in the village can write to her and say what wonderful things people have done, and then you get these lovely baked goods on your doorstep. And I think it's a great example of celebrating the good and getting everybody involved with it. The next thing is that there's an acceptance that it's actually okay to show the real you and to be human. I mean, how many times have you been on calls when the dogs join? I'm waiting for mine to open the door and join us, actually, or kids to jump in, or just to show up on screen and just start talking about maybe some of the genuine human challenges that you're having. So it's definitely something where the window has definitely opened up on this human aspect. The next is that there's been this move to a more flexible approach to work. Now, this is something that probably many of you were hoping to do in the past, and often it was difficult to get leadership buy-in, but we've had no choice in this one, have we? And it's amazing how well all of you have actually reacted and been able to respond to this flexible approach. But as we know, similar to everything else I'm going to be talking about, it is here to stay. There's some different studies I've read that have said that flexibility is something that is actually, from a job seeker perspective, jumped to the top of the list. Some people have even said that they would take a pay cut just to be able to maintain flexibility. So we all need to figure out, what does this look like in this new world? Also, and again, no surprise, there's been this focus on employee well-being. I read a report that was done just recently that said that 80% of companies are now focusing on well-being. If you look at that same report a year ago, it was something like 40 to 50%. So each and every one of us in some way have had to jump in, and I'm going to talk more about well-being in a little while. The next one, again, no surprise, is this focus on diversity. Not just diversity, though, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And like many of the other things, this is absolutely a positive from the pandemic. This is something that we all have wanted to, we knew we needed to focus on diversity in different ways. And it's been really exciting to see how people are sort of broadening how diversity fits in each and every aspect of how they treat their people. And again, this will absolutely continue. Next one, there has been a change in what we expect of our managers. As if a job of a manager was not hard before, now they truly are the lifeline to our employees, and we expect so much more of them. A little bit later, I'm going to share some of these expectations and then what we all can do to support them in this new role. Next, there's a need for a quicker and a more agile approach. Have you ever moved so quickly in your life? And I know it's not sustainable, but one of the ways that we will be able to continue this, and which is why I have this picture here, is I think a lot of the reasons why we've been able to move so fast is because the hurdles have been removed. People are just saying, just get out, do whatever you need to do, just do it. And they're not slowing us down. And I would absolutely love for these hurdles to stay down. And also the buy-in that we've gotten from our leadership teams to continue, because that's what's helped us be so agile. And the more that we can keep these down, the more we can sustain this approach, because it's important as the world continues to change at this pace for us to be agile. Next one, technology. I don't know about you, but I don't know how we would have done half the things that we have done without technology. I mean, look at this amazing event today. Technology has allowed us to do it, and not just do it, but do it actually probably in some ways in different effective ways than in other ways. And I'm sure you've got great examples of what you've done to leverage technology. I'm going to share stories later on what companies are doing. And then last but not least, I truly believe that the definition of employee engagement itself, right to the fundamentals, has absolutely changed. I mentioned I wrote a book, The Rebel Playbook. And in the book, we define an engaged employee in 3 ways, which I'm going to share with you. But I believe that actually there is a 4th part of the definition. So this is what an engaged employee looks like. First of all, they understand and they believe in the direction that the company is going in. And I think that is so important for each and every employee to know that. And again, I think we've done great jobs of communicating and updating to our employees what's happening in the organization. We need to continue with this. Second, an engaged employee understands how their role impacts and contributes. I like to think of a company as a puzzle, and each and every employee is a piece of the puzzle. And it's so important, if you want engaged employees, for them to know how they fit in today and how they fit in tomorrow. Third part of the definition is that an engaged employee genuinely wants their company to succeed. And you've seen this. I'm sure you've been in meetings with people who are engaged. They're the ones who just throw ideas out there. They're not afraid to fail. They're risking it. They have the courage to challenge. That is what an engaged employee is. And then the 4th part of the definition, and as I said, I've seen this be added recently, which is that an engaged employee genuinely believes that their company cares and supports them. It's always been a part of it, but it's never been so important. And what really, really made me see the light with this one is I have a neighbor of mine who's been highly engaged, always tells me how much he loves his job. And then after the first lockdown, when people were having to go back to work, he went to his boss and he said, I've had some medical issues and I really don't feel comfortable traveling back into London. I've shown you I can work from home. Can I please continue? And his boss told him no. His boss said, you know what? Everyone else is coming in 3 days a week. You need to come in. And he all of a sudden, in one split second, went from highly engaged to highly disengaged, just because he felt his company didn't care and support him. And the reason it's so important, and I could share tons of statistics, we've seen so many statistics, is I thought I'd show you what a disengaged employee looks like. This isn't my neighbor, just so you know. In this new world, a disengaged employee is sitting there with their Zoom camera turned off and they care so little about their job that they have their dog filling in. Now, I've got 2 dogs. They're lovely, but I don't think that we need that or we want that in our organizations. So before I go into tips, this is education, so I've got some homework for you. What I would love for you to do is to sit down with your team and go through those 10 challenges and those 10 changes and think about, how do they actually apply at my organization? What are we doing to address how the world is changing? I'm going to share with you some tips, but I think the starting point is just to look at those changes in general. So let's get into action mode. Let's put our rebel cape on here. I wanted to share with you now 10 tips to help you engage your workforce. I do love stories, so I'm going to share as many stories as possible in our time together. So the first tip is to start by reassessing your objectives and your why. I would be very surprised if any one of you, if your objectives or why from an employee engagement perspective has not changed. What was important a year ago is probably very different now. I've just shared 10 ways that it's different. So it's really important to start by looking at what has changed from an objectives perspective. And then once you do that, equally important is to reassess the what. What are the programs that you're doing to achieve the why? Now, I'm a little bit of a spreadsheet geek, and what I would suggest doing is creating a spreadsheet where your new objectives are along the top in all the different columns, and all of your programs, the what, are in different rows. And then go across each program and look at how they actually meet the needs of this new world. Based off of this, when I do this type of approach, it really helps me understand what's fine the way it is, what needs to change, what actually needs to be removed, and then where are there actually gaps that you need to figure out what to add in. So really good exercise to go through. So the rest of the tips are more tangible as far as different things that you can do in respect to the what. So the first one talks about communications, and communications is so important. I'm sure you've seen this. I talked about managers being the lifeline. Communications is absolutely the lifeline as well. But in order for it to be effective, in order for it to be engaging, we have to push ourselves, we have to challenge ourselves to be as open and honest and transparent as possible and do it on an ongoing basis. If I was sitting in front of you, I would get a little glass table out and I would get a bunch of Post-its, because my whole approach to communications as a rebel is to put all the key messages on Post-its, put them on my table, and only remove them if I absolutely positively have to. Too often, when it comes to communications, we start taking those Post-its away and we don't share all the information. Going back to my definition of an engaged employee, that they understand what's going on in the company, they're never going to be engaged if you don't trust them with all the information. Some of the things that companies have been doing really well during the pandemic are 2 things, and I wanted to share some examples. The first is that they've made communications easy for people. I mentioned about it being ongoing. They've made it ongoing so that we can be agile. We can get information out to people very, very quickly. These are 2 examples that I love of companies that have brought it together through a communications portal. If you don't have a portal, that's absolutely fine. The point of this is to make it easy and bring it together so that your employees can truly engage with it. I love the one on the left is Kettle Foods, and they call theirs Kettle Kitchen. The one on the right is Plymouth Community Housing, who I interviewed, and the name of their website or their communications platform is called Janner. And the reason it's called, not Janner, sorry, Janet, because in Plymouth, people are called Janners. I didn't know that. So they named it Janet. But what I love what they've done and other companies have done is they've created a separate section on their platform just for COVID-19 so that employees can go right there, see what's going on. Just like the BBC, right before I was waiting, I was checking to see what tier my village was in. And that's exactly what you need for your employees, be able to give that information, change that information. I know another company I interviewed, they set up just a separate diversity page, again, to show the focus and importance. The other thing that companies are doing to be open and honest and transparent is they're having their leadership team really own it. How powerful is it when your CEO owns the communications. And these are two examples of what CEOs have done. First one is a company called Reward Gateway, and their CEO, Doug, has started doing a weekly blog. Every week he shares information. What's good? What are some of the challenges? He celebrates the good in the world, all the things that I've been talking about. The one on the right-hand side is from Dunelm, and their CEO is Nick. This particular blog he was writing with Will, and it's worked so well that actually what they've done is they've had an Ask Nick section. So people can write in, and they can actually ask questions specifically to Nick. And it's gone so well that they're going to continue with this. So again, don't just think about what is being communicated in an open and honest way. Think about how you do it and also who does it. So, so important. Speaking of communications, the other aspect of communications is listening. And again, I'm sure you've been doing this throughout the pandemic. In the past, we used to do surveys once a year, but more and more people are realizing that's just too long. I don't know about you, but things can change in a day and a week. So it's so important to do pulse surveys. If you don't do pulse surveys already, you can buy a system, but to be honest with you, you can just do some free system. It doesn't matter. As long as you're going and you're asking people, and then just as important, you're doing something with it. Don't just ask the question, but then send something out. I'm working with a company right now, helping them develop their values and behaviors. And before we break for the holidays, I'm going to send them a big summary about how I've been listening to them and what's going to happen next. It's really respectful to do that as part of listening. Apologies for the dog. Sorry about that. The next way is this concept of connecting the workforce. I mentioned that before, how important it is. Remember, just as important as eating your vegetables. And it's so important to find different ways to do that. We all know we have very diverse workforces. So it's important to listen to your employees and understand, what does connection mean? What is actually going to work for you based off of your culture, your values, the diversity? Really bring it together. Now, I actually have a whiteboard over there in my office filled with Post-its of all the lovely things that companies are doing to connect. So I thought I'd share a couple of with you today. These are just a few of the many Post-its. Things like exercise classes, things like meditation classes. Ian, who spoke earlier, does a brilliant job. His group does virtual walks and runs. How fab is that? Nutrition classes. Somebody I interviewed said that since they're not having the restaurant open, they have their chef doing cooking classes. What a great idea. Cocktail making classes, can't go wrong with that. Competitions, we all love a good competitions. Who has the best desk? Talent competition. Spotify had a really good talent competition. Pub quizzes. Cleaning challenge. This is an interesting one. I was interviewing a company and they said we were really trying to pull different people in because it seems like the same people are in every competition. So they spoke to this one group of people and they said, we're a bit OCD, so why don't you let us run a challenge? We're going to do a cleaning challenge. So they would give tips on how to clean, and then they had a competition. And I love that because it shows how you can bring your employees in to actually lead the sessions. And all of a sudden, you've got a whole new group of people who are involved. Pinot and Picasso, a company I interviewed in Australia, did that. You have a glass of wine and you have painting lessons. Love it. And if all else fails, the one on the left is a company I interviewed in the US, and it's a call center where you can imagine how challenging it is. And their employees wanted to have a pie eating contest. They did send me the video, but it was pretty gross. I didn't want to share it with you. But I love that example because I never would have thought of a pie eating contest, but the employees did it. They needed something just to relax and have fun. And speaking of fun, the one on the right-hand side is Misguided, and they're having an awesome possum pet show competition. Gotta love that. So lots of different ways. Have fun. Trial and error. If it works, that's great. If not, try something else. And if you've got some great ideas, let me know and you can go on my board. I wanted to mention last about connection, is don't forget the holidays though, okay? The holiday season, end of year, I know we can't have parties, but don't just ignore it, do something. I actually just wrote a 2-part blog that was posted on HR Zone. And it was yesterday and the day before. And I think I've got about 12 different examples of what companies are doing. But the point is, continue social connections at this important time of the year. Okay, next tip is about values, so important. And my tip here is about bringing your values out to play. It's a term that I use. I just wrote a book on values, and it's called Bringing Your Values Out to Play. And I love that term because I can just picture throwing all the balls in the air and using those values over and over again. And in the book, I talk about using your values in the entire continuum of the employee experience, from hiring to onboarding to recognition. Every single time that we interact with our employees, we need to use our values. And the reason, two reasons. First of all, picture on the left, the way I like to think of your company's mission and purpose is that's your planet. That's where you're trying to get to. And your values and behaviors are on that spaceship. And if you're not bringing your values out to play and living them over and over again, you're going to get off course. Your employees are going to get off course because they're going to be going in the wrong decision, making the wrong decision. So it's so important to go towards the mission and purpose. The other reason it's important to bring them out to play is that you want them to become a part of what I like to think of as your muscle memory. So you don't have to see them on the walls. You don't have to see them in a handbook. They're just a part of who you are. And you use them over and over again in making decisions. And the reason I have this bicycle is to share a story with you. So I used to be a competitive gymnast. And about 10 years after I stopped doing gymnastics, I was riding my bike, not as beautiful as that bike, and I got hit by a car. And as I was flying through the air, my muscle memory took over in two ways. First of all, as a gymnast, as you're flying through the air, you do a flip. So I tucked into a little ball and I landed on my feet. But being a competitive gymnast, I didn't just land on my feet. I did my Olympic landing. Now, the first part was important because it saved my life. The second part was just a bit showing off, I have to say. But the point of this story is, as your employees are flying through the air, having to make these important decisions, you want them to tuck into your values. You want them to embrace them. And the only way that's going to happen is if you continually bring them out to play so everyone can live them. Now, in my original book, I've got great examples of stories of what companies have done. But throughout the pandemic, I decided to give back. And I've decided to write another chapter of my book, which I've turned into a free ebook. And I'll tell you at the end where you can find it. And here are just two stories of how companies are bringing their values out to play during the pandemic. And they're all lovely stories. First one on the left is Zoom. And one of their values is we care for our teammates. And one of the things that they did over the summer is when their children couldn't go to summer camp, which as an American I know is very important. Every child goes to summer camp. They decided to hold Camp Zoomitude. And 3 days a week, all of the children could go on Zoom, and it was like they were at summer camp. So it doesn't just live the value for the employees, their teammates, it actually helped out their teammates' children. So lovely. The other example is a company, Atos, and one of their values is we continually add value. And they do that constantly through the products and the consulting that they do, but they absolutely do it with their employees and have been doing it throughout the pandemic. And one way that they did this, and again, this one was in the summer, is that they saw that employees were struggling with what do you do for a staycation. So they started doing a webinar series on what you could do on a staycation. The person I interviewed, she was in charge of talking about how you can actually have a sleepover or a tent in your back garden and pretend like you're at a campground. Someone else, she said, did a roller coaster tour of the world. Someone else did a cooking one. But the point was they were constantly looking for ways to add value. So again, lots of great examples, lots of different ways. Challenge yourself to do this. Next thing is about recognition, which I mentioned before. And recognition is absolutely an area that we need to be more rebellious in. Absolutely. We need to show our employees over and over again that we genuinely appreciate them. Recognition is so important. It's important to people's well-being. It's also important to people's productivity. It shows your employees even more now than ever that we see them, we value them, we appreciate them, and we encourage them to continue to do the right things. So two things I wanted to mention about recognition. The first one is that it's important when you recognize people. So long service awards, to be honest with you, we spend too much money on those. I'm all for celebrating. Also, things like annual awards, quarterly awards, monthly awards. Again, they're all well and good, but we need something that's more in the moment. Life is changing too quickly. We need to constantly let our people know genuinely and meaningfully that we appreciate them. I've got this silly picture. This is my wedding picture to make the point that if my husband only told me that he loved me once a year, I wouldn't love him and I wouldn't be with him anymore. And we need to think about that when it comes to recognition. How can we constantly let our employees know that we appreciate them and value them? The other thing we can look at is the how. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money to recognize people. It can be as simple as a note. I've got one of my most favorite notes I've kept is from my co-author, and it's a recognition note. And anytime I'm having a bad day, I pull that note out. And that's what we need to do, create those moments for our employees. I shared these because these are just so lovely to show how companies have been adapting throughout the pandemic. These companies have recognition e-cards, which are perfect because they're online, they're easy to do. But if you don't have a platform, you can do it through postcards or handwritten notes. But the point of these is that they adapted them throughout the pandemic to show that actually appreciation, it looks a bit different right now based off of these new challenges. So the one on the left, it's a recognition card that says, "Hello, I enjoy video calls with you." Or the other one here, which is sending a virtual social distance high five. Love it. Or this one's a bit of a play on words, but it was a whole lot butter with you. Get it? Anyway, let me share two more examples. The one on the left, I love recognition wheels. This is a company in the Netherlands, Tony's Chocolonely, and they have something called a Wheel of Wonders, where employees get to spin it and get a prize. Does not have to cost a lot of money. You could get a spin for like, you can leave an hour early, or when we're back in the offices again, your boss will take you tea or make you tea for a week. Does not have to be, it's more the excitement of winning. And during the pandemic, they sent me this picture because during the first lockdown, they changed the prizes to be things like you win toilet paper or you win beer or just silly little things just to have fun and again show that they appreciate them. And then the one on the right-hand side is EDF Energy, and they sent me a picture of this. This is their little box of appreciation. They wanted every employee to know how much they appreciated them going above and beyond in the challenging times. You can imagine in the energy industry, they're really working hard, similar to you in education, absolutely. And every employee got this little box of appreciation with 2 cookies, because when I interviewed her, she said, everyone loves cookies, and lots of little appreciation notes that you could open yourself or you could send them to other people. So again, whatever you want to do that makes sense, but do something that is really going to drive home the point that you value your people over and over again. Next one, well-being. I mentioned I was going to come back to well-being. So important for all of us to really challenge how we look at well-being and what we do with it. Tons of models out there. This is just my latest model. And what I've done is I've taken 4 areas of well-being: physical, mental, financial. I mentioned recognition. I think that's well-being. I've put them in circles, but they all interact because I do think they do intersect with each other. And then I've put social connections on the bottom because that's another way to drive well-being, is through the social connections in the different areas. So it's so important for us to look at our workforce, our diverse workforce, and understand in these 4 areas, or however you define it, how are you going to support your employees? So I've got just a few examples to share with you. Like the others, I could spend the whole time talking to you about this. The first one, I love this one. I just got sent this one. CEO of a company called Love Energy Savings. He actually is leading his virtual exercise classes for a team. What a great way of the CEO stepping up and doing that. He's invited me to join them, which I might join. Great example of physical well-being, but a little bit of mental well-being also being supported by the CEO. The one on the left is a company called Twinkle, and this is an easy one, doesn't cost any money. And it's called their It's Okay campaign. And what they did is they created this campaign that had 3 messages. That's just one of the 3. And each week for 6 weeks, they sent out these messages that talked about what it's okay to do. Because as we're all working in this new way, sometimes it's a little bit hard and it's a little bit stressful to know what's okay. So they sent out simple messages like, it's okay to manage your work-life balance. It's okay to grab a virtual coffee. It's okay to ignore your devices during breaks. all those key messages. And you can imagine what that did to help people from a mental well-being and actually probably physical well-being as well. Again, cost them nothing. The other thing, this is a welcome break. And what they did is they set up an isolation hotline. They heard from their employees that some of them were really struggling when they were in isolation. So the team just put together a group of people that would man the helpline, and people could call in and ask questions or get support. But I think it's a really great way of listening to your employees and quickly adapting and finding something to work for them. And then this last example is a company called Teleperformance, and this is their Keep Smiling campaign. And this one aligns with volunteering, and I think volunteering is so important from a well-being perspective. And they put together these cards. They had a coloring competition with their employees' children who could draw the best pictures, and they put them on postcards. And then people would write hand notes, and they would send them to residents in care homes to let them know that, you know, we're thinking about you, we're supporting you. The one on the left was from their first round. You can see that one, be strong, things will get better, keep smiling. And then the latest one, they just sent me this the other day, is they're doing special ones for Christmas. What's funny, I didn't realize till I was doing this, is it's the same person who did these. Her name is Taylor Smith, and she's 7 years old. But anyway, again, lots of different ways to work when it comes to well-being to make sure that you're supporting all those different quadrants, and just keep trying it. Just like I said with social connections, keep trying it, see what works, understand what's important. Next one, challenge your existing practices. When I wrote my second book on Rebel Playbook, we made the point that we create our policies, both in HR, finance, and everywhere else, for that 1% of people. And if you really think about it, that's what we do. And for the other 99% of people, we piss them off. We disengage them. We do not show the love through our policies. Perfect example, offer letter. Have you ever looked at your offer letter? Just get your offer letter out, get a highlighter, and highlight all the words that show your employees you do not trust them. That's what this company did. Tony's Chocolonely, I mentioned them before. They used to have a 20-page offer letter. And when I interviewed the head of HR, she said she was on a panel once with a lawyer, and the lawyer was saying the same thing she was saying. So she sat down with the lawyer, and the two of them looked through the contract and said, what are the things that are really important? And it's 1 page. This is their 1-page contract. Absolutely amazing. And she said it's definitely more welcoming. It's more human. It's a bit of fun also. When she posted it, she said she had over 1 million views just of this. That's because we all know we need to do it, but we know it is hard. So next time you're doing a policy, again, I challenge you to see how you can create it for that 1% of your employees. And then the last one, I mentioned managers before. It's so important to, first of all, help our employees understand their role, and then to support them with the role. I do a lot of workshops for managers, and the first thing I tell them is the important role that they have to play when it comes to engagement. It is so critical. They can make the difference between engagement, disengagement. Remember what I said about that one employee? That was his manager that did that, okay? There was no policy that said that she could not tell him he could work from home. That was his manager. So these are just 6, and I'm sure you've seen these, but again, think about what can you do to make sure that your managers understand it, and then put in support tools to help them lead with compassion, lead with empathy, being human, being authentic, going back to that looking in the mirror. It's so important for them to role model it, to stay connected, to be that lifeline, and going back to recognition, to say thank you. So my homework for this one, sorry, another round of homework, is to take a step back, look at the 10 things that I've said, and assess which are the ones that are going to make a difference at your organization. So to end, and then I'm going to do questions, is just to give you 3 final tips on how to be an employee engagement rebel. That was a video. I did a talk for a bunch of managers, and that is the South Wales Chief of the Fire Department. He did the rebel jump with me. So 3 things here. First of all, be curious, ask why. I always picture my co-author on my shoulder going, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? You can picture me if you'd like. Challenge your thinking. Don't automatically go to what you've been doing all along. Be unique, do it in your own way. I love sharing stories. I think it's great, but then you need to figure out how you're going to develop it yourself. Think of my Post-its. How are you going to create your own Post-it in a slightly different way? And then last but not least, be brave and have no fear. This slide here is me on the flying trapeze. And the reason I share this is when it comes to being brave, sometimes you just need to let go and you need to trust that it's going to work, and you need to remind yourself why you're doing it. You're doing it to drive engagement, to support your employees, and to support your workforce. So I invite you to join the revolution and to look at things and to challenge yourself and have a bit of fun with being a rebel and wearing your red cape. Thank you very much. These are my contact details. I mentioned my free ebook, that debracorey.me values book. That is where you can get the free ebook. And then there's another website where I've got lots of other free stuff. I'm all about giving things out for free. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if I can figure out how to do that. And then I am going to answer questions. Click here to stop. There you go. Fantastic. All right, I'm going to go into the questions here. First question. Do the generations coming into the workforce typically have different needs from their employer? I think the short answer is yes. The more complicated answer is no. I think the biggest mistake I've made over my career is generalizing. And I think it's important to understand not just the generations, because they have different perspectives and they have different needs, but everything else that impacts diversity. You know, someone might be one age and someone else might be another age. Some might have kids interrupting them all the time, dogs interrupting them. So the most important thing, and I'm glad you asked that question, is to first understand the views and perspectives and then adapt to it. Had a couple questions of that. How do you prevent the least engaged getting left behind? The people who just won't join a I love that. For me, the first thing that I do is find out why they're not engaged. You know, I shared the thing about the cleaning challenge. No matter what that company was doing, they could not get these people engaged. And the reason is that nothing that she was offering to them worked for them. So I'm a very competitive person. I said I was a competitive gymnast. I always believe that there is a way to engage people. You just need to figure out what is it that turns on that light switch with them and see it as a challenge. Pull them in, figure out what it is that is going to make that it tick for them. Because I love what you said. You don't want to leave them behind. And you know what? At some point in time, some people might just not want to do it, but they might not need it. And then that's absolutely fine. Let's see. How can we engage effectively as remote working becomes more the norm and we tend to try making things more personal, individualistic? I think similar to what we're doing with this event, I think we need to find different ways to do things. I'll give you an example. I mentioned I was doing a values and behaviors project. Normally, I would do focus groups face-to-face, but I'm not doing that. So since everyone's calling in remotely, I've used Mentimeter. There's lots of different tools, but I'm using Mentimeter as a way to draw people into the session, into the focus group. So I'm looking at it differently, realizing I've got remote workers. What am I going to do there? So again, it's thinking about how can you do it differently and trialing and erroring. I think I only have 2 more minutes. Let's see. What are the pitfalls we need to avoid in engagement strategies? Good question. I think the pitfalls are not really asking the tough questions of the why, as I said at the beginning, and not really understanding what's going to make the biggest difference in your organization. Sometimes, and this has happened to me before, I get forced by leadership into doing what they think is important. And again, put your red cape on and challenge them and say, is this really important? Is this really going to make the biggest difference? And then constantly assess it through data, through feedback, whatever you need to do. Absolutely. When you're seeing colleagues only briefly over a webcam, how do you get under the skin of how they really feel? Gino, it's a really good question. I got my husband upstairs, who's a manager, And it's been lovely seeing him develop as a manager throughout the pandemic and really just asking those more personal questions. And it's taken him a while to get there, to be able to see through the webcam, because you're right, you can only see so much. And I think it's really giving our managers tools to be able to ask the questions. You know, it's back like when you're with your children. If you ask your children, how do you feel? They're going to say, fine. It's trying to ask the questions and to open the door and make people feel comfortable so they open up. But I do think that it is absolutely a new skill that we all need to develop. So I think I'm out of time. I've shared my contact details with you. I answer every question because I'm here to support anybody who needs it. So if you have any questions, let me know. Or if you want to share all the amazing things you're doing, which I know you are doing, then please share them with me. But with that, I will send you back to your break. I think you've got a break. Wish you a great rest of a conference and all the best with your Rebel Cape and being an employee engagement rebel. Thank you.